Welcome back to Governance Matters. You know us. We dive deep into boardroom best practices and strategic leadership insights. This is the place where we help board members, executives, and governance professionals, elevate decision-making and all of that organizational impact. All right, so let's dive into this new EU directive on equal pay. It has the potential to really shake things up in the boardroom. We're talking about Directive EU 223970 and how it could change the way we all think about compensation and transparency in our companies.
Yeah, this directive is interesting. It doesn't just talk about equal pay for equal work theoretically. It lays out specific ways to actually make it happen, and that's what makes it interesting for boards.
Yeah, up until now, it's mostly been good intentions and general principles. But this directive seems to say, okay, time to put your money where your mouth is.
Exactly, and they're doing that in two main ways: pay transparency and stronger enforcement. Companies can't just say they're paying fairly. They have to be able to prove it.
So no more hiding behind vague job titles or subjective performance evaluations.
Right.
This directive shines a light on the entire compensation process.
And it goes beyond just comparing salaries within the company. Workers have the right to access pay information for people doing similar work at other companies. It's a huge shift.
Wow, that could have a ripple effect on entire industries. Now it's not just keeping up with your competitors in terms of products and services. It's about competing for talent on a whole new level of transparency.
And that transparency goes beyond just salaries. Companies have to be transparent about how they determine pay levels. Bonuses, benefits, even non-financial perks all need to be evaluated and justified. And they have to be demonstrably free from gender bias.
So, hypothetically, a company gives larger bonuses to employees who travel frequently. On the surface, that seems gender neutral. But if men are more likely to be assigned to travel-heavy roles, that policy could be contributing to a gender pay gap.
Exactly. And under this directive, companies would need to demonstrate that those travel assignments are being made fairly, with clear, objective reasons why men might be in those roles more often than women.
This raises the stakes for boards. If they're not actively ensuring that these systems are fair and transparent, they're opening themselves up to a lot of risk.
And the risk isn't just legal. Think about the potential reputational damage. If a company is found to not comply with this directive, in today's world, news travels fast. Consumers are holding companies accountable for ethical practices.
It's a domino effect. Pay discrepancies lead to questions about fairness, then about transparency, then ultimately about trust in the whole company. It can impact everything, from investor confidence to employee morale.
And don't forget about talent acquisition. Top talent, especially younger generations, are looking for companies that align with their values. If a company is behind the curve on equal pay, it'll be hard to attract and retain the best people.
So boards can't afford to ignore this directive. It's not just compliance, it's a strategic imperative.
And that's where the opportunity comes in. If boards embrace this directive and see it as a chance to proactively build a more equitable and transparent workplace, they can gain a competitive advantage.
Turning a potential risk into a positive differentiator, it's a chance to show that you're not just talking about equality, you're actually doing something about it.
And doing it in a way that's tangible and measurable. With this directive, it's not about good intentions. It's about having the data and processes in place to demonstrate that you're paying people fairly regardless of gender.
So let's unpack this a bit further. What are some specific things boards need to be thinking about in terms of implementation and compliance?
One of the first things is to look at their company's current pay practices. Do they understand how pay levels are determined? And can they justify those decisions based on objective gender-neutral criteria?
I imagine a lot of companies, even those with good intentions, might have some hidden biases in their systems, maybe a long-standing policy that no one's ever really questioned, whether it's actually fair.
Exactly. A first perspective can be valuable. Boards can bring an outside lens and ask tough questions that might not be getting asked internally.
So it's about challenging assumptions and really digging into the details, because sometimes the devil is in the details.
Right. And it's not just about looking at salaries in isolation. Boards need to think about the entire employee lifecycle, from recruitment and hiring to promotions and performance evaluations. Are there any points in that process where gender bias might be creeping in, even unintentionally?
It sounds like this directive is pushing companies to take a more holistic view.
Yeah.
of their compensation practices, it's not just about fixing a few numbers, it's about creating a culture of fairness and transparency at every level.
Yeah, it really is about creating that culture. And that's where things can get tricky. Changing policies and procedures is one thing, but shifting mindsets and ingrained biases, that takes real time and effort.
It's like you're asking people to question assumptions they might not even realize they're making. I remember reading this study. It showed that people unconsciously associate certain words and qualities with men and other words and qualities with women. And those associations really impact how we perceive people's competence and value, even at work.
It's amazing how these implicit biases operate under the surface. When it comes to compensation, those biases can create real differences in pay and opportunities. This directive isn't just about checking boxes and making sure policies are technically compliant. It's about challenging those deep-seated beliefs and creating a more level playing field.
So it's not just what you do, it's how you do it. Being intentional and mindful with every decision, every interaction.
Exactly. That's why boards are so crucial. They're not just overseeing compliance, they're setting the tone for the whole organization. They send a message to everyone in the company about what they value, what they expect, and what kind of culture they want to create.
So it's not enough to just say we support equal pay.
Yeah.
You have to demonstrate that commitment in everything you do, from recruiting and hiring to how you promote and reward people.
And you have to be willing to have those tough conversations, challenge the status quo, and hold people accountable, even when it's uncomfortable. Sometimes the most difficult conversations are the most important.
Like that article we discussed on board effectiveness. One key characteristic of a high-performing board is being able to engage in constructive conflict. That ability is going to be even more important now.
Absolutely. You have to be able to challenge assumptions, ask tough questions, push each other to think differently. That can be challenging in a boardroom. There's a lot of pressure to maintain harmony.
But if you're not willing to rock the boat a little,
Yeah.
you probably won't make progress on this.
Exactly. That's where strong leadership is needed. The board chair especially has to create an environment where open and honest dialogue is encouraged and valued, even when it's about sensitive topics, like compensation.
It's like that quote, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. If you're not clear and direct about your expectations and your commitment to equal pay, you're not really being kind to anyone. You're just perpetuating an unfair system.
And that lack of clarity creates uncertainty and anxiety for employees.
Yeah.
If they don't know how their pay is determined, or if they feel like there's no transparency, it erodes trust and morale.
Justice must not only be done, it must also be seen to be done. If the process feels opaque or arbitrary, it breeds resentment and mistrust, even if the outcomes are technically fair.
That's why communication is key. Boards need to communicate clearly and consistently with employees about the company's commitment to equal pay, about the steps they're taking to comply with this directive, and about the process for addressing concerns or complaints.
If you don't communicate, you leave a void that's filled with rumors and speculation.
Right. And the communication has to go both ways. Boards need to listen to employees, understand their concerns, and be responsive to their feedback. Create a dialogue, not just a monologue.
And that dialogue has to be ongoing, not just a one-time thing. This isn't a one-and-done issue. It needs to be part of the company culture, reinforced over time.
It's a journey, not a destination. And like any journey, it needs course correction along the way. You'll make mistakes, you'll learn as you go, and you'll need to adapt and adjust based on what you see and hear.
That's where continuous improvement comes in. Always striving to do better, to be more fair, more transparent, more equitable.
Exactly. And that means being humble, acknowledging that you don't have all the answers, and being open to feedback and new ideas. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being better today than you were yesterday.
That message resonates with a lot of people, especially younger generations. They're looking for companies that are authentic, that are values-driven, and committed to a positive impact on the world.
It's not just about doing the right thing. It's about doing it transparently and accountably. That's what this directive is all about, setting a new standard for fairness and equity at work, and giving boards an opportunity to lead.
So it's not about complying with the letter of the law. It's about embracing the spirit of the law and using it as a catalyst for positive change.
And that's what makes this exciting when you think about it that way. It's not just about mitigating risk. It's about creating a better future for everyone.
Creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to succeed, regardless of gender or any other arbitrary characteristic.
That's a world worth striving for.
It feels like this directive is going to create a ripple effect,
Yeah, it really.
starting with pay transparency, but ultimately shifting mindsets
Yeah.
and creating a more equitable society as a whole.
You're absolutely right. It's fascinating. This directive isn't just about punishing companies that aren't complying. It's also about incentives for companies that are trying to achieve equal pay.
So it's like a carrot and stick approach.
Exactly. And those incentives can take many forms. Tax breaks or subsidies for companies that close the gender pay gap, access to training and resources to help implement pay transparency.
It sounds like a win-win. Companies are rewarded for doing the right thing, and employees benefit from a more equitable workplace.
Exactly. It's the ideal scenario. That's why boards need to be proactive and engaged. They're not just representing the company, they're representing their employees and the community.
It's about recognizing that companies have a responsibility, not just to shareholders, but to all stakeholders.
Exactly. Employees, customers, suppliers, and the communities they operate in.
It's a broader definition of success. It goes beyond just profits. It includes social impact and environmental sustainability.
And that's becoming increasingly important, especially for younger generations. They're looking for companies that align with their values.
It's not just about what you make, it's about how you make it. And who benefits.
That's a great way to put it. This directive pushes companies to think holistically about their role in society and their impact.
So it's not just about closing the gender pay gap. It's about closing the gap between what companies say and what they do.
Yeah, actions speak louder than words. And this directive is making companies walk the talk.
And that's the real challenge and the real opportunity.
It is. It's not going to be easy. Companies will need to make tough decisions, challenge the way they do things, and be willing to invest time and resources to build a more equitable workplace.
But if they're successful, the rewards are huge.
Yeah. They'll be creating a fairer and more just society and a more competitive and sustainable business.
A win-win for everyone.
Exactly. That's why I'm excited about this directive. I think it's going to be a game changer, not just for women, but for all of us.
It's about creating a world where everyone has the chance to succeed.
Based on talent and hard work, not gender.
That's a vision worth fighting for.
It is. This directive is giving us the tools and the momentum to make that vision a reality.
So as a board member, it's time to step up and be a leader. This directive isn't just about compliance. It's a chance to create a legacy of fairness and equity in your company.
Be informed. Don't just understand the law. Understand what it's trying to achieve.
Be proactive. Don't wait for instructions. Examine your company's pay practices. Identify any bias and make a plan to address it.
And be courageous. It won't be easy. You'll have tough conversations. Challenge the status quo and make changes that might not be popular.
But it's about doing the right thing, creating a workplace where everyone feels valued, respected, and rewarded fairly.
It's about making the world a better place. This is your chance to make a difference.